So hello family and friends, it's Dr. Klein. This video is mainly going out to the Wellspring of Life crew and guests who will be coming to the class starting on the 16th of February. So it's going to be at 4 p.m. So we're going to spend an hour, and it's not going to be an extra long hour, but mainly this first class will be kind of going over what I'm about to go over, just a little more detail. And I've been really studying what's called biomechanics for the past 4 years. I've had a YouTube channel for about approximately that time when I first started really getting into it and looking and taking just another look at even what I had been taught coming out of chiropractic school, because I reached the point, and maybe I'll go into a little bit of history about myself, that things weren't lining up. And it's even the biblical principle of with comforts come curses. God doesn't necessarily want us comfortable. If you've been listening to Pastor Dave's messages, you kind of get that idea lately that life is meant to test you. It's the refining fire, and God wants you to grow. He's not always just going to throw healings out at you. A lot of times, I even make the joke that sometimes, Solomon asked for wisdom. God's like, okay, I'm going to give you 700 wives. If you can keep peace in that household, right? Keeping peace with the surrounding nations, it's going to be a walk in the park. So the things we ask for, God's going to be like, all right, you want healing, you want stability and strength, you're going to have to work for it. I'm going to bring those people into your life. I'm going to bring those circumstances into your life that are going to help grow you and bring you to that point. It's not going to be like, bam. But at the end, you'll be able to see the light, and you're like, that's what was going on. So my life has been a great numerous occurrences of injuries and sicknesses because I wanted to help people. I was like, well, you want to help people, you got to know what it's like to be in pain and figure this stuff out on your own. And along my journey, I found foundation training, and this is probably inverted, but this is Dr. Goodman. He had a similar kind of story, being in chiropractic school, told that he had to have back surgery, in the lower lumbar. And that's interesting, when you're trying to become a chiropractor and told that you have to have surgery, for a disc issue. And he's like, I have to figure this out. How can I help other people avoid surgery if I'm about to go get surgery myself? And I was at that point in my life too. So he thought, why don't I just strengthen these little muscles around the spine? And the one thing we studied, and even in my posture report videos, looking at what's called mechanoreception. And there's the little tiny muscles have lots of mechanoreceptors. Like your suboccipital muscles can have approximately 100 to 200 mechanoreceptors, whereas your lat muscle is big, broad muscle. Big muscles have like 1 or 2. So this is this idea of proprioception, your brain's mapping system and how you're holding yourself. A lot of us don't really realize how we're holding ourselves in a wrong position, and things just get worse and worse over time. I call this the dimming light bulb effect. Like even in this room right now, I should probably replace some of these light bulbs, but I don't really notice it because the light bulb's just slowly dimming, and then you're trying to read your book, and, and then the light bulb goes out, and that's when injury happens. And then as soon as you get back to a different place, like now I'm like, wow, I can actually do the things I want to do. I can run around and go hiking without being in crippling pain the next day. And that's where I was at. It was this cycle of, like, even I'd like to go play Frisbee, so I'd go play Frisbee for an hour, and I would just like limp around. I'd wake up with swollen ankles, like pretty much crawling to the bathroom in the middle of the night, kind of pain. And then old injuries started reappearing, an old separated shoulder that I thought was healed and came back, and ironically it was the setting of people's shoulders that hurt my own shoulder. It's like, I don't even want to do that anymore. And I'm just unable to do my job really as a chiropractor anymore. I mean, it's kind of a physical job, and the back was hurting, numbness down my left arm. I got shingles starting the occiput. I'm like, I'm not stressed emotionally, but mechanical stress can really just wreak havoc over time, and it creates emotional stress. There's stress. There's toxic stress, there's thoughts, and then there's trauma. There's those 3 stressors that can really add up. And the only one that really we have control over is mechanical. We can make our spine strong. We can strengthen these little tiny muscles to actually do their job. Mechanical stress isn't hitting us as hard. That's the idea behind foundation training. How you do that, it's a little trickier. But it all comes back to some really basic things. But even like diet, you might not have control over what you can eat. You can getting like the most perfect food, you're eating beets and kale, but you're still not doing well. Your body can't digest it. So we call that the sympathetic state, fight or flight. Because there's a few things when you're what we call fighting the tiger, or you're running from the tiger, and some of us are constantly running from the proverbial tiger, right, in life. And you're not really worried about digesting when you're about to be digested, running from the tiger. So digestion goes out the window, and with that goes your immune system, and heart rate speeds up, breathing is shallow, body tightens to protect your vital organs. These are just natural responses to being in stress. Your body takes on stress mode. So that's a very mechanical thing. It's a mental thing, but it's a mechanical thing. So sometimes we change how we're holding ourselves, and people are like, oh, I feel more confident when I stand up straight. Mechanical change affecting an emotional change. They definitely go hand in hand. Obviously, if something's really wreaking havoc on you emotionally, it's going to affect you physically. But the stronger you are physically, the less emotions are going to trouble you as much. So there's some of the nervous system connections. Because the spine is only important, strengthening these little muscles of the spine is only important because why? It encases the spinal cord, part of your central nervous system. What's great about the spine is it's got a lot of joints. There's facet joints, there's rib joints, there's disc joints. There's a lot of mobility. And one of the errors I was kind of taught is we need more mobility in the spine. And the more I, whatever you think about chiropractors, we look at a lot of spines every day. I noticed that even people who did yoga, which is trying to mobilize the spine, right? Get more movement out of the spine, had really stiff spines, where whole blocks of segments were just really compressed, if you will. And the big thing is we rob motion from the spine all day long. When we sit, or moving around, even when we're walking, instead of utilizing what we call the ball socket joints, which are supposed to have a lot of motion. It's this ball in the socket joint supposed to have this whole kind of almost good 360 degrees of motion, whereas the facet joints, not so much individually, but together they form a lot of motion. But we just abuse that motion. Instead of picking something up, what do? You'll notice we bend from the back. Same with yoga, we're trying to increase that range of motion, And it's not that I hate yoga, it's the principle behind yoga. And it's not that I love foundation training, it's the principle behind foundation training. So you can apply foundation training into anything you're doing. You could apply it to yoga. So it's is a hip flexor stretch, is that warrior one? Or is it hip flexor stretch? It's the principle that we're applying. So there's some spiritual things that I don't like about yoga, but it's also some physical things that I disagree with in its application of let's force range of motion. No, let's force range of motion where we really need it. And that's usually our hips. So foundation training is about your foundation. So your feet and your hips supporting the spine. A lot of us, if you watch the posture report, we try to hold ourselves up with our shoulders all day long. And we're like, why do I have spasms here and headaches? You're overutilizing muscles in a way that they're not designed to. And breathing comes into that too. Because the hip and the hip flexor have a direct attachment to your diaphragm. And none of us use our diaphragm correctly. Even if you've been taught how to sing and do diaphragm breathing, this is something completely different. The decompression breathing is almost backwards than the diaphragm breathing. So that would be a little troublesome for you singers who are trying to apply your diaphragm breathing. Because overall, we just use our accessory breathing muscles. So those are a lot of the shoulders, the pecs, serratus anterior, these muscles that can do that shallow breathing. Why? Because we do shallow breathing in the sympathetic state when we're in fight or flight, stress mode. And sometimes we might not even be stressed, right? It's just that you've mechanically put yourself into stress mode. If you're breathing shallowly, it's going to change pressure on your nerves, it's going to increase your heart rate. All of a sudden, you're experiencing the symptoms of being in constant fight or flight. And it wasn't really an emotional thing to begin with, it was a mechanical thing. Slowly over time. The light bulb again, right? That slowly dimming light bulb that you don't really notice. You just kind of accept. It's life. I'm getting older. Such is life. And then you start asking questions like, well, why does my right shoulder hurt more than my left? They're the same age. Why does my right foot swell up but my left doesn't? They're the same age. Well, you have abused that one more. Can you unabuse it? Can you teach it to be stable again? To me, I had shattered both heels. That's why I mentioned the feet. And I always did physical therapy exercises for my feet. It helped a little bit. chiropractic, help a little bit. Everything would come back. So I'm like, well, there must be some imbalance. So it's trying to strengthen the foot. Didn't really happen until I started working on my foundation, my hips, and strengthening my spine. And right along there is when I had this idea of, I was doing a lot of band work and just watching people do band work, noticing that they weren't usually using their shoulders and their hips, they're mobilizing the spine. They're using the spine. You don't even know that you're using the spine a lot. And that's the thing that really trying to beat people out is they're so used to extending and flexing at the spine, and they think that's what good posture is. And that's why the very first video of the posture report is everything you've been taught about posture is a lie, because a lot of times we're just taught wrong. And one thing I like that, kind of an older idea is put the book on your head, right? As soon as I put the book on the head, my hips are forced to square underneath my spine, and I drive up against it. This was an interesting thought I had when I was on a missions trip in Tanzania, however you say that. Women carrying these 5-gallon buckets of water to the brim on their heads. I'm like, well, they must have like sandwiched necks when they get older. Not necessarily. Why? Because we're resisting gravity. In functional strength training, we call this load tolerance. You're increasing your load tolerance. And you're centering your gravity. You're getting your hips underneath you to drive upwards. That's why I like a lot of barbell work too. In foundation training, we're not really using weights. But again, you can apply the principle to functional strength training. So usually when you're doing like a deadlift, it can be a really great motion because you're taking that weight in your full body. You're pushing the ground away, driving up, throwing that bar overhead, doing snatches. That's all increasing your load tolerance. And that's going to help use your spine. So a lot of times when we go in the gym, we're sitting on machines or on the treadmill, we're holding on. Like, you just killed your biomechanics there. You're not actually challenging your balance. When you're walking, your arm should be doing this cross-crawl, pendulum-type motion. And if that's not happening, the spine is not engaging. The spine's kind of job is to be that central structure everything attaches to. And it should be stimulating. The more we stimulate the spine, the stronger it gets. It's like learning to play guitar. At first, you're like, press the strings, like the fine motor control, and eventually you get it. It comes in time. And the nerves actually thicken. We look at cadaver studies of guitar players. The brachial plexus and the nerves are thicker. It's not necessarily about strengthening those muscles. It's about the nerve, the brain to the body connection. And it's the same with these postural muscles that we never talk to. The brain is just not talking to these muscles because we're always going to play to our dominances. And that's the problem sometimes when we get into cardio. We get this idea of like, I gotta lose weight because weight is stressing my joints. There's another version of you, weighs the same, but is more muscular. Same pull down on gravity, same mass. You're like, well, that's how you carry it. No, there's obese people who carry their fat proportionally. I never did. It was always in my stomach. I think one thing I noticed too is being in pain. Even though my diet really hasn't changed. I was even probably eating healthier then because I'm like, man, I'm overweight. I'm trying to eat better. I'm trying to do cardio. I can't do cardio because it hurts me. I get weight gain. And a lot of it has to do with fight or flight. Your body's just not breaking things down and metabolizing as it should. So you're just packing it on. That's your Krebs cycle for all you nursing students and glycolysis and everything. It does factor in, and that's all important. So like the weight started dropping as soon as I started moving right and breathing better. It's been 4 years I've been doing this. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out my posture type and how to really find those restrictions to drive up against. Because then not only are we breaking up those restrictions, but we're strengthening the muscles that hold us up. So a lot of what we do is involuntary, right? Breathing is usually involuntary. We're not really thinking about it. But if you're locked into a certain position, your body is going to go with what is easy. When we go to sleep at night, it's all involuntary, right? The brain is shut down. So your body is going to want to position itself where it's most comfortable. So if your muscles are patterned a certain way to twist you or cause torsion, it's going to want to go in that position. That's why sleeping on the left sometimes feels better than sleeping on the right, or sleeping on your stomach feels better than sleeping on your back. It's because your body wants to be that position, because it doesn't want stretch on those tight muscles. So if there's a tight muscle, there's a weak muscle. They go hand in hand. These are called antagonist muscles. So it's like if you're always doing bicep curls, it's going to get weaker. Is it going to affect the joints? Yes. Is it going to involuntarily affect the nervous system? Of course. It's kinetic change. It's all connected. I get made fun of because I like to connect your hip joint to the universe. But in a way, it's piece of the puzzle. So we can't just have one thing not working. You know, it's like the Bible says, one part of the body not working, it can affect the whole body. All right. So foundation training is all about your hips and your feet. Why? Flat surfaces and shoes and lots of sitting. So comforts come curses. Why? Because we're not teaching our feet to grip and grab, and then our hips aren't actually being taught how to work, because we've created all these ways of, you know, flatness, and we don't need to actually activate our hips. So then our spine just ends up doing all the work and all the bending, and you get disc degeneration, compression, people start losing height, and that leads to nervous system stress. So even with flat surfaces and shoes, we can still, not saying, you know, run around barefoot, we just need to think about it a little bit more. Retrain our bodies how to move again, because it might just be that you just never learned how to move right. And you watch kids, they're really good, you know, they get the flat foot squat going down, like, how do they even do that? They're crawling around, and then eventually we lose it because we try to make them walk too early. Sometimes crawling's important, but then even when they learn to walk, they're not getting challenged as much. You know, we need to, back in the day, right now, I was always out in the woods crawling around, but I still developed a lot of spinal problems because we spend so much time sitting to it, and sitting's a big factor. And it's not sitting is bad, it's how we sit. It's even how chairs are designed are terrible. Even though I'm sitting here, it's like I could feel I'm just rounded, okay? And it's not that we need to always correct these things and always be conscious about these things. It's just we're spending a little time strengthening every day, so your body's going to naturally take a better position more often. And then you have like little periods of time. Like for me in the car, it's like, usually it's like, okay, that's spinal time. So I'm going to apply foundation principles when I'm driving, because why not? I got nothing else to do. And then when I want to go home and watch Netflix with the wife, looking around and just chill and relax, right? So sleeping, it's always like, people ask me, I'm like, what's the best position to sleep? You're not going to be able to fall asleep anyways in that position. And you know, you put yourself in a coffin and duct tape yourself down, maybe, but your body's going to unconsciously sometimes you're going to roll, and you know, it doesn't matter what pillow you got, your body wants to be in that distorted position because it doesn't want stress, because it's uncomfortable to sleep in a stressed position where you're stretching a muscle. So the more you do this foundation training, I've noticed that, because I used to have like little foam rollers and little pieces of foam that I would put blocks under my hips, and I'd sleep like a mummy, because if I didn't, I'd wake up and I was like, oh God, it's all just terrible. And now, like, I could sleep like, you know, like when you were a kid, you know, you could sleep that way. Wake up, you feel fine, go on a roller coaster, like, da, 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 da. Now you do that, you're like, oh, not roller coaster, why? Because we're older? No, we lost stability. So the muscles that hold the joints and protect the joints are imbalanced. Your brain's not talking to them. So when you sleep or when you go on a roller coaster, and damages the joints because the muscles aren't doing their jobs. So in the world of chiropractic, we're trying to put the joint back in. It's like, ah, you're perfect. Now you're symmetrical. You walk out the door sometimes and things are falling apart. And it's a different world in the chiropractic. You know, there used to be like chiropractic miracles, you know, like just the one bone. Like, oh my gosh, that'd be good for a year. Now it's people coming in like 3-4 times a week. Like, doc, I understand, chiropractic doesn't work. And I remember that same phrase, because that's how I felt. I was being adjusted 5 times a week, still in chronic pain. I would have like that foam roller, crack my back, like, oh yeah, feels good. Like 3 seconds later, like, oh, I'm still sandwiched again. I'm like, well, we're mobilizing something, but it's just coming back. The muscles are pulling it right back in. So strengthen. Why don't we just strengthen? It's not that mobilization is bad. A lot of times you need it working hand in hand with strengthening. But it's like one without the other. They got to work together. So even without chiropractic, you can still do this stuff and strengthen your spine. But I just suggest something like that, or advanced stretching if you're scared of chiropractors, or if you want to go to Rimrock Wellness Center, you can ask us not to manipulate. We can use light force techniques, little instruments, or my father's chiropractor, he doesn't manipulate anything, he just does really light. Because a lot of times segments are so unstable, there's no muscular holding stability anyways, so it's just quick speed. You're just what we call toggling that bone back into place without really any twisting or turning. We're just pressuring that bone. It lines up nice and easy, because it just needs that little bit of stimulus to help line everything up. It's not that everything's super locked. There are some movement. A lot of times those areas, even when we get them moving, it's like, oh, that's what I really needed. It comes right back again. We're not addressing the cause, which is improper movement. All right. So good summary. We'll hit a lot of that and foundation training, the videos that we'll be going through. It's called a series called Core Elements, and we'll be doing a couple of videos and a couple of different exercises. And the video exercises are really no more than 7 to 10 minutes. Sometimes they're a little bit longer. You might do some longer ones eventually, but it's not like you're going to be like doing a yoga class and sweating and booty boot camp, for an hour. It's really, because you can get a lot done in just 5 minutes. And that's what I'm saying. 5 to 10 minutes every day doing foundation training is really all you need, because they're just such powerful movements. And the more you do foundation training, you'll notice the harder these exercises get. So I put a lot of intention into them because I know how to find those restrictions and I know how to push up against them. When you're first doing it, you're like, what? I don't really feel the wall you're talking about. The wall is, in my definition of the wall, is when you're activating the weak muscle, which is, if it's weak, usually it's overstretched, it becomes inhibited. So when we're trying to engage that, it's going to fight against its antagonist brother. So usually hip flexors are the weak ones, and the tight erectors in the back will fight against, because they want to pull you into extension. That's what most people do. They're like, this is good posture, right? Looks good. You're really compressing your spine to make you look like you're standing upright. You're disengaging your hips. Lots of breakdown. Won't even get into it. We'll get into it eventually. But the wall, engaging that weak muscle, and then you're stretching. So I call this whole body active stretching, because it's really a lot of things going on, not just 2 muscles, but just an example. And that tight muscle is being stretched. And eventually there's going to be that point where it's just shaking. You're trying to activate the weak one, and the tight one's being stretched, and you're going to start shaking and tremoring and sweating. That's the wall. The wall is hard to find. I'm just going to show you the decompression stance, because everything builds off the decompression stance. And even my decompression stance is imperfect, and the way I get into it is going to be a little different than you get into it. And there's all different ideas, but if you want to think about book on the head, lifting up, squaring the hips, that's a good way to think about it. I like to think from the ground up, but I'll just show you that. I'm going to show you my belly, because the breathing is important here. So it's almost like we're doing a vacuum breath. And I just want to show you what that looks like with the rib cage. And maybe this light, you might be able to see 2 of the muscle groups in the back that are really important. They're called the serratus posterior muscles. And in cadaver studies, these muscles they're weak. They're accessory breathing muscles, but we don't use them, which made me think about them a lot. And even Dr. Goodman talks about them in his book. But I just really kind of rediscovered them and how important they are, because they kind of like a Chinese finger trap. They pry open the rib cage above and below. Because we tend to, if I do this, I'm kind of pulling up on one end, but not equally pulling. It's like the tug of war that we want. This tailbone pulling away from the head, creating full length in the spine as one. A lot of us, we kind of pull one way, and it ends up being more of an extension than a direct pull. And that's when you get that. That's when you're, everything, oh, wow. Really powerful movement. Takes a little bit to understand, a little get, but that's essentially what we're doing, is we're pulling the hips down, strong foundation, so we can lift the head up. A lot of us are going to try to drive up with our shoulders. Again, that's the dysfunctional breathing pattern. If right now, if you take a big deep breath in and you do this, you got problems, and we need to work on it. So I will actively pull my shoulders down when I breathe, and you'll see a little bit of that. So I just wanted to show you that, and maybe you could see some of the back muscles stretching, and then I'll just show them the basic, what they call the founder exercise. It looks like yoga's chair pose if you're into yoga. But the difference is activating what we call the posterior chain. That's all the muscles, kind of multifidus, transversal spinalis muscles from the back of the skull. They run all the way down the tailbone, little tiny muscles, so high mechanoreception. The more we stimulate those, the more it's like the little fingers. You have a lot of mechanoreception in your fingers. That's why you feel numbness in your hand. And a lot of you think, oh, it's carpal tunnel, it's from the wrist. It's from the neck, it's from the shoulder. More than 50% of the time, because 50% of carpal tunnel surgeries fail. So it's probably even more than that. It's probably like a good statistic that they like to say. All right, so let me clip this mic. Hopefully this has actually been recorded. Never know. And we'll see if that will work. Yeah. All right. So let's angle that up just a little bit. And we'll do it standing. All right. So there's a wire in the way. Let's go this way. There we go. No wire. So pulling the hips underneath, and I'll get the hands out of the way in a second here, but we call this the measuring stick hands, where the pinky's on the front of the pelvis, thumb is on the ribs, but I'll actually pull a little bit more into the diaphragm, because remember when you inhale, we want to pull the diaphragm down. Maybe I'll show that from the front first. So pulling the hips underneath, driving my spine straight up, so when I inhale, pull down. See how the ribs flare a little bit? So this is a bit of a glute squeeze, hip flexor squeeze, all at the same time. So I'm pulling down where it's just like that. So it's kind of like a vacuum breath, but you know as vacuum breathers will get in here. So we're doing both at the same time. Strong hip flexor engagement, the feet are engaging. Sometimes I'll even put the big toes together to help turn the hips in. And then when I drive up, really lengthening the spine, I can just start feeling that shake. And just breathing here. When I inhale, I'll pull my shoulders down so they don't rise up. And it's like inflating a balloon. It's inhale and you hold. You let the air out, but you don't let your stance compress. So the next breath builds on that a little bit. Just like you're blowing up a balloon. You don't want to let the air back out, right? Because then you get nowhere. So you do 10 of those in a row. I'm already kind of shaky. So then I'll just show you the founder position with that, because everything builds off that stance. Anything we're doing, sitting, standing. For me, I try to squeeze the glutes a little bit more than the hip flexors. And let me widen my stance, because most times you'll see it kind of narrow. And we'll talk a lot about the feet, because the arches of the feet matter. And there are 3 arches in each foot. Lengthening, pulling the shoulders down. This is what we call long wing. And you should feel, if your stance is right, that's impossible to straighten your elbows. You'll feel so much tension. Because to straighten my elbows, I have to kind of let go of all that I built in my spine. So that's one way to know. Same with your knees. They should be slightly bent. If you're locking them out, you're doing something in your spine. So long wing, I feel all that tension. I bring it up into the sphere of tension. Let's back up a little bit. And even here, it kind of looks like my spine is getting curved. But that's because it's just true reality. A lot of our spines are curved and you don't really know it. But here we're going to try to minimize that curve in the spine.
So here we just have the muscles from the back, just showing you from little 2 angles here. So we can see lengthening. Big difference here is we're not pinching the shoulder blades together. We're actually kind of widening them to activate the spine. You see how the shoulders kind of pull apart. That's your serratus anterior muscle doing that. And just loading everything. So when we go into the hinge position and we raise the arms, you're driving the tailbone away from the skull. You can kind of see those erector muscles that attach down by your sacrum, your pelvis, getting stretched. Different angle here. Maybe able to see it a little bit better. Pulling the hips in, getting the stance right, decompressing, broadening those shoulders. And you can see that tension a little bit better there. Almost as it outlines the traps where they connect to the erector spinal muscles that go up and attach to your ribs. Just stretching all of that which causes compression all day long.
Like, I don't want to flatten my back out either. A lot of people do that. That's not what we want either. You're supposed to have a natural curve there in that lumbar spine. So we're not trying to flatten out any of the curves, but we are trying to flatten out all 3 together. But we don't want to lock out one, because then it distorts other ones. All 3 curves of the spine work together. Fingertips together, and you're just hinging at the hips. Difference here than yoga is the only movement in the spine is a lengthening. Where in yoga, they will flatten that low back out to get really deep. And this is what they end up looking like, right? That's chair pose. But it's only hitting one area and not all areas together. That's the trick, is everything is one. All right, so we'll build up off that. Hopefully you could hear that through this mic. But I'll see you guys at class.